Good morning. Good morning, all AML community. I'm really glad to be here today and to start this event. And I will start with 3 big thank you. So first of all, thank you for all our community who gather here today and dedicated the morning time to be here and to listen really important topic. The second thank you will be for all our speakers that you agreed to share this experience with us, with all the ML community. And third thank you is for my team that making it possible to be here today. And with all the challenges that we have, still we have this event today here. So today we're starting our new series of events, which will be called AML Morning Mixer. It will be at least one per month. And please really stay tuned, and the following themes will be announced very soon. And today we are starting with one of the most probably important topic. It's compliance culture. And in the end of last year we released the questions, which topics you would like to hear this year, and compliance culture was one of the top, so that's why we're starting with this question. And yeah, probably without further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Simona Balčiūnaitė, Head of Compliance in SEB Bank Baltics. And she will talk about compliance culture. I hope she will share some tips and tricks. So really, please stay tuned and listen and get all the words what our experts will say.
So good morning. So good to see you, so many of you in the audience, and I know that a lot of people joined also online, which probably means that compliance culture is a very relevant topic today. So when Eimantas invited to this discussion, first I thought like, well, this is really not a new topic, and we were talking about compliance culture, especially after the financial crisis, when this focus from financial risks switched to conduct risks. So it was a lot of discussion then that actually lack of compliance culture was the reason why some of the financial institutions failed against their clients, against the investors. But also when we talk about compliance culture, the immediate perception is that compliance is about being compliant with legal requirements. But myself, coming from a large banking group, compliance, first of all, is about reputation and trust. And in order to reach that, just satisfying the regulator is certainly not enough. So yeah, like one step back. This is the picture which comes from the group of 30. It's actually quite famous group of well-known people from the financial markets, current and former large banks managers, and also academia. It was established in 1978, and compliance culture actually is one of the topics they started to analyze after the financial crisis. So what this picture is basically saying is that compliance comprises not only from conduct and behaviors, but also values and ethics. So conduct and behaviors is something that you can actually measure. So this is something that people actually do. But values and ethics are those not visible elements of a culture, but they have to be in each of the organization if the purpose to reach that outcome with clients and stakeholders, like reputation and trust. So what they also say in that research is that when conduct could be like good or bad, compliant, not compliant, culture is not something that is empirically good and bad. Culture should be right for each organization. So this is something that is internal part of the organization. And later today, we will have a discussion also with also colleagues from different organizations, from fintechs as well, and it will be, I think, really interesting also to discuss what is the perception of a compliance in different organizations. But as I come from a bank, just to kick this discussion off, I will try to share some of my views, how I see compliance culture in a bank, in a larger financial institution, and which elements is actually signals of compliance existence in the organization. So the first element is really most commonly known element, which all of you probably have heard, is so-called top from the top. So this is kind of classical, you know, classical saying when you start talking about the compliance culture. But what does it actually mean? So, like, the first thought is that it probably should mean that top managers of the organization should understand the importance of compliance. So I think the first step, at least you know, for the banks, financial institutions, comes from the fit and proper procedure, from the licensing. So this is the first test by the regulator whether the tone is right, so to say. But of course, the main question is actually materializing of that tone in practice, and how it actually is translated in the organization. So what I would say is that, like, the first thing when I think about the tone from the top is that, of course, there should be good understanding of compliance requirements and importance of compliance within the top management. But then there should be this, as I call it, circle of actions and information created within an organization, meaning that there should be very like clear communication cascading down from the top management, but also there should be reporting back from the organization on the compliance topics. And it is part of the organization structure how each management board set up this kind of structure in order to get information back from the organization. How to get that information back from the organization? In my view, the main element here is transparency and trust within the organization. So if, for example, employees are really like afraid or scared of the top management and they don't report the incidents because they know how important it is to be compliant, and if you're not compliant, then there could be consequences, you know, for everyone. So it is really important to build this kind of trust within the organization between the management teams, but also amongst the employees as well, that they would be able to identify the gaps in compliance and report to their managers, and most importantly to the top management. Leading by example is also, of course, important, because if organization is required to be compliant in their decisions, then of course at the top management level there should be also examples how decisions are taken considering the the effect on the reputation of the organization as well. So for example, some business opportunity could be sometimes rejected, even if it is like legally compliant, but if there could be an effect, a reputational effect for the organization, then top management should also make clear that this is not the decision they want. And then this translates also to the whole organization. The third element, which is, I think, is a strong signal about existence of top from the tone, is attitude, top management attitude toward control functions. And this is quite visible, I think, in each organization when you see how important are the control functions for the top management. And like an example is that, for example, compliance in its compliance function, compliance officers in their advisory functions, they should be providing advice not only to the first line business people, but also to the top management. So if in the organization the top management is keeping compliance people close, that they consult them when taking the decision, this is already a signal that this compliance culture exists in that organization. And same goes for the other control functions, risk oversight, as well as internal audit. Attitude toward internal audit findings is extremely important, I think, and not only following up, but also following up on closing internal audit findings, but also the attitude toward deadlines. This is also something that shows that compliance is important for the top management if they look strictly at the deadlines agreed with the internal audit. So the next one, which I would like to mention as well, is effective governance and accountability. It is probably not worth talking much about governance structures, because it's something that is really should be individually decided in each of the organizations. But what I noticed is important in the whole, how the whole organizational structure is set up, is risk-taking level. So what I mean by risk-taking level in the compliance area, this means that risks related to compliance or non-compliance should be taken at the proper level. And it is, of course, like for each organization to decide, but I would say that, again, a strong signal of compliance culture is that when risks related to non-compliance are taken, if they have to be taken, because in ideal situation those risks should be mitigated or closed, but in case they have to be taken, and those situations sometimes appear, that is not normal part of the business when you waiting some time your business priorities against like full compliance with the requirements. So in case those decisions have to be taken in the organization, a great signal of a compliance culture is that when those decisions are taken at the top management level, but not by any executive in the first line. So this is also something that is important, as well as board level management, board level conduct management reporting as well. So information, as I have mentioned before, should flow to the top management. The next one, and this is actually related very much, like all these elements are interrelated, but two very much related elements is effective free lines of defense, and also first line business DNA, as they call it. Three lines of defense system is something that is really known for each of you. It's today, I think it's an essential part of a financial institution. And when we talk about the second and the third line of defense, probably at least this theory how it should operate is pretty clear. But what is important is that first line of defense, the business line, is also responsible for compliance. How to achieve that? We will have a separate we will have a discussion today also on this topic, but just maybe a few views also on this from my side is that first of all, it is important to build a habit within the first line to consult with legal and compliance functions. So I think when this habit is formed within the organization, then it is indeed that compliance culture starts working within the organization. Trainings are, of course, an important element, and today financial institutions have developed significantly over the years. There is a lot of online trainings available on compliance topics, but I still believe that direct contact with the first line and discussions on practical examples help most to promote compliance culture in the first line. Incentives management, it's also another element which is very much related with the first line of defense DNA. Incentives management for many years was and still is an important topic of a discussion. Regulation also in this area started after the financial crisis, when mis-selling cases were escalated to the public due to internal systems, which resulted in harmful effects for the customers. So it's a broadly regulated area, and many banks have already changed their incentive systems to support the compliance culture in the organization, to have neutral incentive systems. So it's also an important part of creating compliance culture. Business gifts and entertainments is also another topic very much related with the first line culture as well. And probably, I think 5-6 years ago, before Christmas, it was quite usual to see clients going to the financial institutions with gift bags, and also employees of financial institutions going to the clients with gift bags. But I think this is no longer the case in many financial institutions, and not only financial institutions, also in the market in general. So this is also a shift of a culture, I think, in this context. And one last element which I would like to mention is communication with the customers. I think it's also very important element where compliance culture could be created, because, as I mentioned, it's not only about compliance with legal requirements, it's a lot about reputation and trust. So one of the examples is I could share some, I think not in AML area, but in GDPR area, personal data protection area. So there was a dilemma, I think, some years ago, when data breach incident happened, and they can happen from time to time as operational incidents. Mistakes happen sometimes, documents of one client could be accidentally handled to another client. There could be emails sent to a wrong client, and so on. So those things happen. And there was also a discussion whether we should inform the client about the fact that incident happened. And as you know, today it is a legal requirement in GDPR to inform the client, but it wasn't, you know, some years ago. And I remember that at that time in SEB we discussed and we actually decided that this is something that the bank has to do. And the reason is being fair and being transparent with the client, first of all, because an effect could be on client interest, because this has happened. But also from, you know, risk management perspective, we also thought that in case you don't do that and then the client is informed from other sources that this has happened, this could end up really in not a good situation for anybody. And then we have actually implemented this culture within the organization to inform the clients when those incidents have happened, even before this became a legal requirement. And an interesting part of it is that until today, I actually don't know even one client who would be like extremely furious about it or would go, you know, with complaints to the regulators. They usually are grateful that the bank informed about it. Of course, it's not a nice situation, but then you can also inform about what kind of mitigants you have, that you have, you know, stopped this data from further leaking, or you blocked the account, or like you can explain how this incident was managed. So this is also an example how, with like additional step, you actually can have this compliance culture within the organization, and you can create it. Few words about compliance function, because when we talk about compliance, I think there is no longer this perception that compliance function is responsible for the compliance within an organization, but the role is still, I think, very, very important. And I have my own opinion about what compliance function is, but in this context of promoting compliance culture, I could share from my own experience that, well, when we can probably divide compliance function into like two parts. One part is monitoring, which is also required and expected by the regulators. But then the second important part is advisory. So advisory, I think, is the, you know, part of compliance function which really helps to promote compliance culture in the organization. And what really helps is that the business line, the first line, they understand compliance function as support and help for them to solve difficult situations, instead of this, like, you know, auditing, control, or you know, supervision function, basically. So this is also something that that you can, you know, establish in the organization by, you know, personal relation with the first line business, discussions about difficult, you know, situations and supporting them, and also helping them not only to identify a gap but also help them to close the gap. Think of the ways which could help to close the gap. So I think this is something that is extremely important, and I personally like this advisory compliance model much better than the monitoring, like strictly monitoring model. But of course, it's again something to choose for each organization. And probably the last thing that I wanted also to mention in this context is compliance culture and the regulator. So, of course, as we started discussing, is that compliance culture is something that should grow within the organization. It's part of the organizational structure. But I see also a strong role of a regulator in this context, and regulators could really help to promote compliance culture in the organizations. They could help to build also knowledge and experience in identifying non-compliance, in discussing with the business how to close the gaps, and also not coming forward with the sanctions in each of the case, but having that approach of market overviews and also guidelines to the business, how to deal with the compliance topics in general. So I think that is something that helps for the market participants to build compliance culture, not to be afraid to consult in case something happens. And I think it's also important part of the compliance function role, that compliance officers should also establish this relationship with the regulators to be able to inform them in case incident happens, to inform about the action plans, to discuss gray areas when it's not clear how to interpret compliance requirements. So that is something that our regulator in Lithuania is open to, I think, and it is possible to establish this kind of relationship for all organizations, I think. So I will stop here. I hope that this is some background for our further discussion, and it will be really interesting to hear what are your opinions on this topic.
So I guess we can take over. I don't know if the mics are working. Yes, they are. So I will invite our panel to please sit and join us. Simona, you stay with us.
Yes.
Au milieu. We're doing this in French, right? Everybody is fine with that, yeah? Cool. Perfect. Let me just take my notes. Good morning, everybody. There are actually much more people than I thought we had. I was not seeing from where I was. So good morning again. Thanks for being with us today, here and remotely as well. It's nice to see that people still do come in person without being too much afraid. I hope we will be able to continue to do that for a little bit of time. I'm Alexandre Pinault. I'm heading the global expansion at Arrival Bank, which is a SME neobank focusing on SMEs. I'm also the board member at the FinTech Hub Association and at the ACAMS Baltic chapter. So the idea today is really to take over on Simona's presentation, to open the discussion a little bit as to what we started to discuss. There will be opportunity for you in the room, but also afterward online to ask questions. So if you have anything in mind, please feel free to just let us know, whether it is on YouTube or afterward. And today, to follow up on Simona's presentation, which opened up a lot of questions on a topic which is still very current, namely the compliance culture, we will start discussing on something which is very much related to that, and which is namely, is there a line to draw between business and compliance, between the business and compliance unit? So that's a topic, as Simona and Ementas mentioned, that has been selected by the AML Center following a survey that they've done among the subjects which the audience would rather see approach. We'll try to tackle that today. I think there are a lot of different angles that we could be taking here. And for that, we have today, within our panel, so still Simona Balciunalte, head of Baltic Compliance at SEB, who has given us the honor to do this very nice presentation. Sigute Concevičiūtė, CEO at SumUp.
Morning.
You both have the experience in compliance and in business, so that will be very interesting. We have Thibaut Catry, Chief Compliance Officer and Chief Risk Officer at ConnectPay. So we have also the fintech aspect of the things here. And Vito Tasdenta, finally, member of the board, member of Head of Compliance, Regional MLRO for Europe at Revolut as well. And you were also in the banking area before, so that's very interesting.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. So I guess we can start, maybe reflect a little bit on your presentation, Simona, which brought a lot of different things and possible angle to this discussion. One stuff that really caught my attention really within your presentation was at the beginning, the differentiation and basically also how to build a compliance culture versus strictly how to implement a compliance conduct. So basically, outside of the internal controls, outside of the policies and procedure, how do you manage to instill this compliance culture without your organization? That's very broad, but I guess we can start with that. Anybody wants to take that? Thibaut?
All right, so let's get started then. I think, you know, a very good point you were mentioning, and it's what everybody is saying, is like the tone at the top. But something that is also critical is also regarding the level of authority of the two functions, right? And I think when you have the head of compliance in the company and the head of business, they should come with the same level of authority. They shouldn't have, you know, one that is like overruling the other. And, you know, this definition of like compliance versus business, I think, you know, it's not really there anymore. Like, it was there, I think, a few years ago when people were really showing, okay, compliance is making us lose money, it's too many investment, we cannot develop the business and so on. But I think nowadays, people really understand that compliance is the way we need to do the business, right? And the business itself is and remains the first line and should act as the first line in compliance. And I think, you know, it's very important that there is this cooperation, there is this authority, and there is this knowledge that is being shared. So I think that was really the point you were mentioning, and I think that's very true in that. So I guess my answer is that I don't think there is really business versus compliance. If there are companies that there is still business versus compliance, I think, you know, it's time to evaluate and move to the next step, actually.
I think we're in a really cool moment, I mean, for a few years now, and we know it very well in Lithuania because we both have a strong banking system and a stronger compliance fintech ecosystem. Although compliance never has been and never will be a revenue-generating unit, it's much more than it has ever been, super important into being competitive in the business. If you're a fintech and your onboarding flow is new, is bad, you will never get clients. So I guess the business gets that as well, and that makes them a bit more interested in what is happening in the compliance area. Do you have anything else to share maybe on that?
I would like also to just to continue what Thibaut has mentioned, because we need to understand how compliance appeared, yes, when, so from where. So it was some time ago, it was just a regulatory requirement, yes, you need to have compliance officer. Then I remember, you know, at that time everybody was thinking, okay, what they will do? Yeah? What is the role? Okay, so okay, some kind of control and so on, okay. Do your control, don't mess my business. Yeah? So now it becomes more and more integrated, and of course it depends on the companies, you know, how mature it is, but definitely, as you mentioned, so it's now a completely different story, yes, because everybody understands that this is part of the game to be compliant, and if you basically you will lose your money, yes, you will lose your investments, your reputation, and now there are plenty of examples, and that's why the organizations still already understand that it should be, I mean, equal discussions in decision-making process. Both parts should be involved in business and compliance, We also see that, I mean, control functions are in the boards of entities, which was, I mean, unthinkable like 10 years ago, completely. So now it's like already everybody understands that it should be like on decision making the same level, yes, as we were just touching.
Maybe that's one of the stuff that changed, that compliance is not involved just when it's needed, it's involved from the very beginning. Before it was indeed a controlling function, so before we release a product, before we go to a new market, once everything is done, we ask compliance, hey, what do you guys think? Now it's from the beginning. Like everybody makes the decision together, everybody is involved. Do you see that in?
Yeah, I definitely do, and in fact it was a very nice point in the presentation about compliance being advisory role and compliance talking and communicating with the first line. I think now it's the key, especially if in fintech or in a fast scaling organization, compliance needs to talk to business and business needs to talk to compliance. And this communication needs to be timely because at least from my experiences, majority of frustrations that happen in business in terms of compliance requirements, they just happen because the discussion didn't start at the right time. Let's say we want to scale, I don't know, let's say Australia, whatever, business wants to scale, but to scale into Australia, you need a license. And to get a license, you need years, months, so it's timely. Or if you need to change, I don't know, your AML monitoring system, again, you cannot, these things do not happen during a night. So I think involving compliance into all the discussions happening at the organizational level in terms of priorities, products, scaling, etc., is the key. Is the key in order to ensure the program is functioning efficiently.
I agree. I think we all have, as compliance officer or former compliance officer, countless examples of how late we've been involved and the problem this has been creating. So yeah.
I can just jump on what Gute you were saying because it is really interesting on the topic of discussion. But there is also one part that is really important, right? Is that the compliance person need to be also showing, like, by the knowledge that they are ready to assist, right? You have this kind of compliance old school, maybe, and let's call it like this, right? Where you would have compliance that is here as a no, I don't want to get involved, it's too complicated, it's out of my area. I think, you know, as compliance, to become relevant and to be able to support those changes, to be able to, for the business to involve us for any project, we need to be like supportive, and we need to come and in any project to tell them, okay, maybe I don't know yet, but let me get back to you, right? And we should have always this open approach, not saying like, no, but you know, I will look into it and I will provide the requirement. I will come with a solution and actually come with this. And I think that pays off then on the longer term when, you know, business wants to launch Australia. It doesn't matter if you have a process in place. It doesn't matter, you know, if everything is very well structured, but business know that I will come to my compliance guy and I will know, you know, what would be the approach. So it's very, very key point here to become relevant as a compliance person in a company.
Or if you get a no, at least the no is explained. Why the no?
Yeah, education as well, from both sides, so that everybody understands, the business line understand that if it's a no, it's not just a no. There are reasons why it's important for the whole organization, and that next time, indeed, they don't come up with the same issue because they will have an understanding. I think that's changing as well, yeah. This compliance being the no person to now being more open is changing a lot.
And just to add also, I mean, definitely in this, in current setup, yes, when there are a lot of competition in the market, when companies are creating new products, you know, completely new, maybe, what others don't do at that time, yeah? So you cannot have like a business and compliance team, which always like one is going like on one direction, on another always saying no, yeah? So it should be definitely an attitude that we always say, wait a minute, you know, I will come back to you, I will think about that. You always need to say that. I mean, I completely agree with you guys that it should be part of the culture also.
And there is something which I think is also increasingly important now, and that goes exactly the other way around as what you were saying, is that it's good that the compliance function try to educate business line as to what motivates their reason to say yes, to say no, or to say yes with some limitation, but also that compliance team get a better understanding of product development, tech, so that they really have all the tools to be able to take a decision. Because let's be honest as well, we from the compliance side, sometime, as you mentioned, we did not have a sufficient understanding of the product. We did not see how we could assess our risk, so we were just like, all right, yeah, what is that? And that was not working. So it really goes in both ways. Maybe because we hear a lot of it should be, it must be, but maybe Simona, how do you feel it is actually within your organization? Do you think it's, do you feel it's working, this type of approach?
I certainly feel it's working, but what you discuss here is this like huge shift, actually, huge change, because I also remember those times, and I worked for the regulator at that time when we tried to like explain to the market what is compliance function, and we didn't know ourselves. First of all, at that time, we tried to invite the largest bank compliance officers to explain, and then it was such a big misunderstanding, and we just could see from eyes of the audience that they were asking, like, I mean, is it like, what's the difference from the legal? Do we really need it? Can we merge it with the legal function? So I think today when we discuss about compliance function in many audiences and discussions, and in the fintech sector also, which is, I think it's extremely good news, this understanding of what compliance function is. And I think actually that this is the agreement between the management teams and also the view of the top management, what they want to achieve. So if the purpose is, quick financial results, maybe you can choose different strategy. But if the purpose is long-term, and if you really want to create this reputation in the market, then reputation is most guarded asset, I would say, for the financial institution. And in order to protect it, you actually need to take those steps, and then compliance culture starts building up in the organization, because there is no other way. Also, what is important to mention is that reputation loss also costs a lot. So this is something that needs to be taken into account, that, for example, you have some, business plan, short-term or even long-term business plan, but if you ruin your reputation, then the effect could be that you will lose your business completely. And even if you will not lose it, for at least like larger organizations which are listed in the stock exchange, for example, it could be, huge financial loss, just because some news came out that organization was not, behaving how it should behave also in the eyes of the public. And the public is asking also more and more from the financial institutions.
I think there is something you mentioned during your presentation, taking the GDPR example, that it's not, the culture is also about doing what's right, even if you don't have to. I think that's super important. And I think that's something that is hard to get, but that's super important. It comes to the difference between risk appetite and risk capacity. Like, okay, my risk capacity, because my regulatory requirement is like that, it doesn't mean that my risk appetite should be exactly where my risk capacity is. And I think it's here more and more as well. What can I do? What do I want to do as an organization? What other business client do I want to serve? I can serve this client, but do I really want to do it ourselves? Is it really us as an organization? And that goes beyond the risk appetite, the risk capacity, the regulatory requirements, it's the ethics, and this is this stuff that is hard to say really within an organization. Anyway, something really practical now. So we are one of the country in Europe, if not the country in Europe, with the most licensed financial institution now, which is credit. Let's acknowledge that. So we see more and more fintechs appearing on a monthly basis, more and more new financial institutions with a need for conduct, for culture. My question now, and it goes for the banking sector, for the fintech sector, is do you think there is, at the moment, a sufficient understanding when it comes to, let's take a specific kind of risk, the AML CFT risk and responsibility? Do you think there is a sufficient understanding of that kind of risk and responsibility within the board of the financial institution in Lithuania?
So I'll go first. I think two things. First of all, the situation is getting much better. Here I would agree. I mean, it's the compliance organizations I have seen a couple of years even before. And currently are two different things and not even comparable. But when thinking about, like if there's sufficient understanding and sufficient knowledge in various fintechs, first of all, we cannot compare everyone. I mean, we have a lot, our ecosystem is still evolving, and the maturity of organization is very different. So that's why I think hiring is important. Hire the right people to be your compliance officers, to be your leads of your organization, etc. But it's not only about understanding, and you very nicely touched on this in the presentation. It's also about embedding that. Understanding, I think, in the market, yes, we have very good understanding what are the rules that we need to follow. But embedding it into practice, into organizational culture, it's a challenge. For majority of organizations, I still think it's a challenge. And it's constantly evolving. Things are not kind of set in the ground and stable.
And to jump on the board topic, I think, to your point, yes, there are very different level of maturity in the market, I would say. I agree also that it's going in the right direction. And I think, it's not a matter of if it's there everywhere, but it will need to be there everywhere. And if you have like a board that is fully business oriented, that has no knowledge about compliance and what needs to be in place and so on, as you were mentioning, it's something that is here like for the short run, right? And I think board member at this stage, any board of director, any management body in a company, need to acknowledge that the compliance part is there and need to push it on the people. I think if you have a management that is really pushing and saying, okay, compliance is like a tick box, it's like, oh yeah, we have a CCO is there, we have a monitoring team, KYC, we good, no, let's do business. It doesn't work, right? You cannot like pick a side, for example. You need to be like overseeing in general, and you need to push this culture of compliance, and you need to push it on the people as a board person. So even if you come from a full like business background, you need to learn about it, you need to understand it, you need to have the right people that support you and to pass this message to the team. If you are like ignoring it, if you are cutting the two, then it's the road to failure.
So I guess that's coming back to setting the tone from the top. Would you have, I don't know, example or things you want to share about what's happening maybe within your organization or other organization as to what could be good practices for that? Simona, yeah?
What can also be observed in recent years is that compliance competence and compliance people are getting to the management boards, which was not the case like 10 years ago. It was only business people there. And like Vytautas is an example of that also. So, which also is, I think, as also reflects the importance of compliance topic, and like AML, for example, requirements in some organizations there are also like management board members responsible for that area. It's a legal requirement as well, which comes from the AML directive, but it's no longer a formal legal requirement, which you just choose one, assign the responsibility, and that's it. Today, I think in some organizations we see also management board members which are only responsible for like financial crime prevention area, so they have this competence and knowledge for the legal requirements, and they are also part of decision making in the management board, which is also a change. So compliance is no longer just second line of defense function. We listen to your opinion and then we do our decisions. So this is a change.
Maybe Vitotas on that.
Yeah, I also would like to add, how to practically implement that. Yeah, because I mean, we always talk about tone from the top. Yes, it should be management support, strategy, whatever. But at least there are some things, yes, which at least I learned in my experience that first of all, the company needs to ensure that everybody understands the strategic direction, yes, and not only strategic but tactical. What do I mean by saying that? Is that okay? What are our priorities as a company for this quarter? Okay, launch this product. Go there, do that, yes? Everybody should understand this, business and compliance, and then they focus on these things, and this helps to build better cooperation. I mean, if you are getting other products, to approve, you understand that this one is most important, this is your strategic piece, yes? Focus on that. Another thing is risk appetite. Maybe we can touch it later on this also, but risk appetite is also important, that when organizations are saying, okay, our risk appetite is low, yes, we don't want to be non-compliant. But what does it mean actually in practice, yes? For one person, like being non-compliant is, do one thing, to a compliance officer maybe another thing. You need to better define, yes? So more granular, set some limits, set some whatever. And also decision making, yeah, how you take decisions. So we touched this, that management takes decision, yes, for sure, but it should be clear understanding in the organization. So let's imagine we have a business decision, compliance opinion, and if management would be taking decisions that for them it's okay that there is an open risk and no mitigation measures, this will become a routine, yeah? I mean, all the time. Then all the time, everybody will be bringing questions which are prepared like 80%, but maybe it's fine for that company. I mean, management should decide, is it good enough or not? Can we live like this, or we need to go and do extra mile and, and to mitigate the risk? In my view, management should make sure that decisions which are prepared to take a decision, risks should be mitigated. Interim, long-term, whatever. Plan should be always there. Otherwise, you will give a very clear message to all the organization. I don't care about the risk.
Maybe let's bounce back on this risk appetite part, because we still see, I think less and less, but we still see a lot of companies, financial institutions with, as you say, risk appetite statement that goes, ABC Bank has 0 tolerance for non-compliance. Yeah, okay, what does it mean? I mean, you cannot control everything. So do you feel, do you see, do you participate to the development of the risk appetite so that it is measured, so that there are metrics, so that it is concrete? Do you see that happening more, and do you feel like your staff, your compliance staff, is aware of the difference between the risk appetite versus strictly just the regulatory requirements? Thibaut, yeah?
So I think it's a good point, right? Like any bank can write, oh, my appetite is that we'll not do anything illegal, right? Great. I mean, if you would go the other way around, then you would have a problem anyway. But, and you were mentioning the part on regulatory and risk appetite. And I think, yes, the regulatory is the base, but you need to differentiate the risk appetite on it, in which you need to be setting very clear criteria that are not only understandable for the compliance team, but also for the business, right? What is your target? What is like the limit of the risk, and what is outside the risk appetite, right? I think it's really giving you where you are, which direction the trends are going, and you can also correct them sorry, on time. So it's all about judging on the implementation of your program and having like very easily measurable point. So it's like, you know, your portfolio, you know, it's easy to calculate the risk of your portfolio. Where do you want to stand? What is the limit? And what is outside your risk appetite, right? And then, you know, on a regular basis, you would check where you are standing. It can be, we're mentioning GDPR, right? Or incident in general. You can also have very clear criteria on like incidents that are being put in place, potential GDPR breach and so on. And when you see that this risk is going higher, that's when you need to apply the level of correction before you go out of your appetite. And I think that's a very important part, measurable. Like it makes no sense to say, hey, we don't do anything illegal here, you know?
And just to add on that, it's also a regulatory expectation today. I mean, times when you could just have two-sentence statement somewhere in some kind of document are over. I mean, that would not fly with any regulator during any of the reviews. So yeah, definitely agree. Quantified and measurable.
Yeah, just maybe also to add, you know, some examples. Maybe it would be useful for the audience. So let's say how to measure. Yeah. So some quick examples. Yeah. So let's say when we all understand that okay, incident is important. Yeah. But you need to predefine in advance. So let's say if there would be a certain amount of incidents in some particular area or with product or with client groups or whatever, and I'm talking about incidents from broader perspective. Yes, it could be GDPR incident, it could be AML issues or whatever, then you agree that on that note you will meet and discuss, and most probably your decision would be that we will stop this completely until we haven't fixed that. Yes. So this should be like understanding. It's not like that, okay, we wait for something. Yes, as you mentioned, we need to clearly define what is the routine if our appetite will be breached. It's not just going and reporting, we breached appetite, so what? What do we do? This is most important thing.
And I think we come back to the ticking the box, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, if you have a risk appetite to have a risk appetite and you don't take action, that it's just a waste of time again. So completely agree.
And it also sets the line for exception. That's what you were saying. Like you have a risk appetite, you know your limits, you know that sometime you may want for certain reason to go slightly beyond limits, but that you have to make sure that you know the risk you are taking by doing that. And that's also a very important way of, very practical way of doing that. We've talked about the regulator as well in the approach towards compliance culture, risk appetites as well. I wanted to ask you, now that we've approached the compliance culture, the relationship between the business and compliance unit within the organization, if you feel that this type of mindset, explaining, motivating decision, maybe being more about pedagogy rather than sanction, as you mentioned. Do you feel that it's also coming from the regulatory and maybe supervisory sides as well? Anybody?
I can start. Oh, you go.
Yes, definitely in Lithuania the situation is much, I would say the regulator is much open-minded than in other jurisdictions that I work with. That's first thing. In X, let's say, jurisdiction, I don't want to mention, but going and talking to regulator, you know, like, first of all, that would never happen face-to-face, maybe in written. So I think in Lithuania, we are in a good place in terms of being able to approach the regulator, but the initiative should also come from, let's say, if we're talking about fintechs, from the fintech side. Again, as you mentioned in the presentation, you need to build that relationship. The compliance officer needs to feel comfortable asking questions, participating in the discussions, bringing that back with knowledge to the business and management. So yeah, I mean, I personally believe that the relationship with the regulator in Lithuania is efficient.
I think it's really like a two-person dance, right? Is that on one side, if you have this attitude as a financial institution of, oh, something happened, but I will bury it. If I show it to the regulator, then I will have problem. Then the regulator obviously will have this approach of, oh, they are trying to hide something, and I will be digging, and that's how the punishment kind of come, right? So it's really like those two bodies, the financial institution, the regulator, need to find this understanding and a certain level of trust, maybe is not the right word, but like understanding, let's say, right? In a way that fintechs, EMI, financial institution, banks, would not be in this situation of, oh, something is going wrong, I need to bury it, right? But if something is going wrong, I would, I want to bring it to my regulator, so they would advise me what the best approach to do and so on, right? And again, if the regulators see, oh, everyone in the market is burying and doesn't want to cooperate, then I go fully harsh on them, right? But if there is this level of cooperation, then I think it also pushes the regulator to be more open, to provide the right guidance, to provide the right level of communication. And I agree with you that in Lithuania we are actually quite mature on this, on the regulatory environment. I still think some of the financial institutions need to have this proactive attitude of going to the regulator rather than waiting for the regulator to come to them, maybe.
Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would also like to add. So yeah, this trust, basically, of course, we need to build that trust, and what I see that definitely there is such a process, and such understanding. What is also very important that it should be also balanced policy of the regulator when it comes to sanctions or various restrictions. Yeah, so. Let's say if the regulator would start punishing market participants for gaps which they disclose, which they want to talk about, so definitely it would be opposite effect. Yes, that everybody will start hiding everything, and I hope that also there is still room also in Lithuania. Yes, to work on is that. It should be maybe more properly regulated regimes how to, settle the problems. Yes. So let's say you have a problem, you want to disclose. Yes. Yes, you disclose, and then in the end you feel that you will not be punished, but only in this case if you will mitigate this risk in some certain time. Yes. So that this would be fair game. Yeah. That mistakes are happening. Yeah. But then it would be even additional level of transparency, yeah, that you would bring even more problems to the regulators, and they would be just saying, okay, guys, you need to fix that problem. If you will not fix, then we will fix. Yeah. But then it would be also additional level, in my view, and we actually have it in some countries. The same UK, we can say, yes, and in some point US, some other European countries. So yeah, and I see that there is also like public consultations happening from Bank of Lithuania. Maybe they will have this regime as well. I hope so.
Public consultation is indeed, in my opinion, very, very important. It's in setting up discussion channel, even beyond potential breach, like we did something bad, we need to tell you, maybe we can find a way to settle it indeed. I recall the example of Belarusian sectorial sanction. When the guidelines and when the rules were set up, it was super complicated to apply because it's sectorial sanction, it's very targeted by definition, and I recall banks expressing that, fintechs, and I think that comes to what you were saying. If you're an employee within an organization, you see something bad happen, but you're afraid of what will happen if you say it, you just don't go and don't say it. And I think a lot of fintechs, although they did realize that it was super complicated to implement, if even possible for some of them, they just, they'd rather not share it, which is indeed, it's sad for both parties. So,
yeah. Of course, and just to add on that, I mean, and talking about consequences, so Simona mentioned trust. I completely agree that trust is very important. And, to get fined from the regulator, yes, it's not about money actually. It's about your business expansion, because maybe you have planned business expansion in some regions, yes, and you're talking with other regulators. What they will do? They will say, okay, let's stop this initiative until you will not fix problems in your, like, say, other countries, yes. Your business partners, correspondent banks would be asking the same question. So it's trust is much more valuable than just to pay like whatever fine. Nobody cares about fine in general. They care about trust.
Yeah, and it's not the fine that is costly, it's the reputation loss afterwards, right?
yeah, we've seen that at the scale of entire countries as well. So yeah, indeed. I think we're reaching towards the end. So I don't know if you have some takeaway, anything you want to add, any tips, tricks to share with everybody today.
I just want to add something that we didn't touch on the culture of compliance regarding training, right? You were mentioning training is a very important part, and that's a way, we can also spread this culture and people understand. I just, I remember some of the training I was doing at the beginning of my career, where it was like a few PowerPoint slides with like subtitles, and then one person reading it on top, and I couldn't, skip to the next slide until the person was done reading it, right? And a lot of companies, they would say, oh yeah, I'm investing so much, in this training program. It's a lot of money, but still, it's not coming. Like, people don't grasp with this culture of compliance, and I think it's very important that any company reconsiders the training program. It's not just about like doing a few AML training, doing a few compliance training that are like, you have your employees that just want like to get rid of it, to go back to his work because it's just a waste of time, but making them relevant. And I think if you make training that are interesting, that are helping the people, I think that's a big part of the work that is being done to implement this culture of compliance.
Yeah, and there are workshops to set up KPIs, there are workshops to set up yearly goals. Why not making workshop near the beach for compliance training? It can be pleasant as well.
Yeah, don't make like training with boring compliance as it's presented, right? Make it interesting.
Yeah, I really agree with that. In my personal experience, like for me, this like direct contact works best. I think with people when you have not like slide training, but discussion and concrete cases, and of course, like it's very effective when something happens, the incident, then everybody is really listening to that training. Then after some time, again, it like this knowledge and awareness goes down a bit, so you really need to repeat it and remind also people and use the examples from the other parts of the organization. So I think this is also where compliance officer can establish this relationship also with the business people through the trainings. And after the trainings, you can get additional calls, additional questions. You get involved into situations that you have mentioned during the training. So I think it's also a perfect way to like create this trust between business people and compliance people.
Thanks. Anything else? Sure, yeah. In terms of training, you mean?
In terms of training, to make it relevant, to satisfy not only regulator, but to reach the true objectives.
I think it's what we're discussing, right? Don't do a training just to do a training. I think your training program needs to be really tailored to each of the function. I mean, you will not like bring super advanced AML training to like business people, right? And I think also like it needs to be concrete example that speaks to people, you know? I'm always talking when working with like training provider, what I want is that when the training is provided, there is a bit of a wow effect, right? Like people are listening and say, oh, okay, so now I need to be careful and this kind of thing. And if the training you are provided and you have an audience that is like very passive, silent, you know, I'm checking my email and something, that's a failure. That's a failed training. Like you need to captivate them. It's not always easy, right? It's also an issue of attitude with some of the people. And you need to make them relevant and really tailor them to each of the different departments.
And also just to add on that, so as for all presentations, yes, you need to think about what kind of messages you want to deliver. 2, 3, whatever. What is the message? Okay, please come to compliance officer when the problem is, yes. Please go to compliance officer if you want to launch something new. Some kind of like this, yes, but basically it should be clear messages in between. You know, if we would just be talking about, you know, Al Capone, you know, that some kind of why this is happening and so on. So okay, some people they will be interested, some people they will okay. I mean, I will, you know, do something else, but it's very important what kind of message we are delivering, and I agree with you completely. It should be tailor-made, and the problem sometimes happens that guys are buying, you know, externally training programs which are not tailor-made. They are talking about things which are not relevant for the company, just to tick the box to the regulator that I have a training.
Yeah, I would tend to agree on that as well, especially given the shape of the fintech ecosystem now. Fintechs companies are doing so many different stuff, dealing with so many different type of clients in so many different jurisdictions, that if you don't have something which is tailor-made, something that speaks to your team, if they cannot embody what the trainer is saying, if they cannot recognize challenges that they will face in their daily life at work, they will never identify, and that will not resonate. So that's challenging, because most of the trainings are made to be multiplied, standardized, so that they will sell to the most. But that exists, so yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I can also share something, like ML topic, for example, ML officers, right? So it's a lot of trainings right now on ML topic, you know, internal, external, ACOMs, whatever, whatever you want, you can get it. But actually what I see in like my AML team is that actually they don't need trainings on the legal requirements because they know it. They are knowledgeable about it. What they actually need is more trainings on the product, services, how they work, you know, that part, in order to understand specific financial service, in order to be able to, you know, spot that something is going wrong. So I think within the organization you actually can find already really good trainings for compliance officers, for example, just, you know, shadowing some, you know, operations people or markets people, you know, understanding the like securities trading systems, for example, and so on. So it is possible also to arrange those kinds of trainings within the organization as well, just using each other experiences.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting what you mentioned regarding securities, but securities, like for example crypto, which is a very sexy topic but full of myths and legends, is sometimes is not well understood enough, even by the compliance function. Meaning the compliance function will know very well what is to be done, what are the regulatory requirements, also hopefully as well what is the risk appetite of my organization, what I can do and what I cannot, but will face themselves being powerless because they have a lack of understanding on a given product, which is normal if nobody told you before. So I think very much specializing your trainings on issue that they will even express. You can even ask your staff, what what don't you feel comfortable doing because you don't understand? What would you like to approach? Asking is also a very good practice, I would say, to understand.
And also talking about trainings, it's very relevant in terms of a board as well. If you just want to tick the box, that's why I don't like the service providers at all. I mean, go that way. But if you want to build and embed that compliance culture, then you need to tailor and explain to the board members what are the things we are talking about.
Any other questions? I don't see any on YouTube, but it might be because somehow the page is not refreshed. But anyway, thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks a lot to all of you in the panel. And that was the first one of a long series, hopefully. So long life to AML Morning Mixer. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.